On January 23, 2005, a 60-year-old LCC professor was found barely alive in her classroom in the SPS building at Lansing Community College. There was evidence of a brutal struggle, a sexual assault, and the graphic use of a remote control, and a murder. Moments after her discovery, she died. 2 days later, police take 27-year-old Claude McCollum into custody for questioning. 1 day later, McCollum is charged with raping and killing the professor. At trial, jurors are presented evidence, including a supposed confession from McCollum, evidence from his LCC Star card that he was on campus at the time of the murder, and the testimony that a clothing fiber may link McCollum to the murder. In April of 2006, McCollum was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. I was attending Lansing Community College around this time. I remember the fear the community had when the murder took place, and I remember everyone feeling a bit safer after we thought the rapist and murderer had been caught and sent to prison. What I didn't know at the time was that a serious miscarriage of justice had taken place. What we now know is that Michigan State Police created a report based on security footage from LCC campus. The videotape clearly and definitively proved that Mr. McCollum could not have committed the crime. He was in another part of the campus at the TLC building during the murder. We also now know that another killer later confessed to killing the LCC professor. We know that a fingerprint that was discovered at the scene was linked to a serial killer, and that he had been terrorizing Lansing around this time. The serial killer later confessed to killing 6 people, but may have killed even more. He was quoted as saying to the police, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's 6 people, that I have murdered. I murdered them all. Today, my interview is with Judge Hugh Clarke, Jr. He was a prominent attorney, a school board member, and a district court judge, and many other things. Today I'm talking to him because he was the attorney that helped Claude McCollum win his exoneration and freedom from prison. In this mind-blowing interview, we learn new details that I don't think have been covered in the media. We found out that not only did Michigan State Police know that McCollum was on videotape, proving that he was in another area of the campus at the time of the murder, Judge Clarke alleges that the Michigan State Police explicitly stated in the report that, quote, McCollum could not have committed the crime, and that the brother of the victim signed a sworn statement that the assistant prosecutor told him that the prosecutor himself had removed this crucial detail that clearly exonerated McCollum from the report before providing it to McCollum's defense attorney, and that the report was only provided to the defense minutes before the detective went on the stand to testify about the videotape evidence. The Attorney General later investigated the actions of the assistant prosecuting attorney, and he was later fired from his position. However, in an incredibly shocking and ironic twist that we learn about in this interview, not only was the prosecutor allowed to keep his law license, the state later granted his law firm a monetary grant to go into prisons and teach prisoners how to overturn their wrongful convictions. We also learn that the supposed confession that was entered into evidence against Mr. McCollum was nothing close to a confession. Mr. McCollum, who had mental difficulties, was a homeless at the time and sometimes slept on the campus, was asked during the interrogation about the hypothetical situation in which he may have killed someone. McCollum told the police that he couldn't have done it, but if he had, maybe he was sleepwalking. During the supposed confession, he also gave the police important details that did not match the crime or the victim. In this amazing interview, not only do we learn those details about the troubling conviction of McCollum, we are confronted with a terrifying reality. Matthew Macon was a serial killer that terrorized the Lansing area and confessed to committing at least 6 murders, many of which involved sexual acts. Born into a home of violence and abuse, Matthew Macon's life was a recipe for disaster. Macon's own history of delinquency and sexual assault began in his youth, leading to multiple stints in facilities for troubled children. Despite completing a sex offender treatment program and being deemed a low risk for reoffending, Macon's dark past foreshadowed the serial killer he would later become. Macon was in and out of prison starting at a young age. When he was only 14, he was arrested for sexually assaulting a girl with a stick, a despicable act that he had allegedly potentially learned and witnessed from his own father. Not only are Macon's crimes horrifying and brutal, we are also confronted with a devastating question when we examine the timeline of events. Macon's first known murder was in 2004, less than a year before the LCC Professor's murder in January of 2005. Macon would later go on to kill at least 5 victims after the LCC Professor's murder that we know he committed and has confessed to. We have to ask ourselves a difficult question. If Claude McCollum would not have been wrongly accused and convicted of this murder, would Matthew Macon have been caught in 2005, and potentially 5 lives would have been saved? In the following interview, we discuss this case and the troubling questions with the Honorable Judge Hugh Clarke, Jr. We also discuss the time he represented Tupac Shakur, his time on the Lansing School Board, and his views on the criminal justice system. I hope that you find this interview as fascinating as I did. Judge Hugh Clarke, Jr., thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate you being here. If we could kind of start out, could you just tell us a little bit about yourself and your background?
Well, thank you for asking me to participate in this program. I think it's rather timely given some of the national events going on at this time when we talk about justice or the justice system. I was born and raised in Detroit, Michigan, did my formal education there in college, was accepted into Thomas M. Cooley Law School, which is now the Western Michigan University Law School. 1976, graduated in 1979, worked initially as an associate general counsel for the state Senate. I did that for a couple of years, and I always wanted to go into private practice. And I grew up watching Perry Mason, so I just knew that was going to be me. And, you get one of those Perry Mason moments. So in April 1st, as a matter of fact, of 1981, I put in my notice and left the Senate to start a private practice. I teamed up with a former state representative who had some office space. Was with him, Paul Rosenbaum, for a period of time, I'd say from 81 to, maybe 87, 88. And then I just went out on my own private practice, Initially, you try to do a little bit of everything, but it soon just narrowed it to doing criminal defense work. I mean, divorce work was fine until you get those clients that can't seem to agree on anything. Okay, and it's I used to always wonder, how did these two people get married, and how did they stay married long enough to have 4 kids and look at them now arguing over everything? I got tired of it. I tell you, it just wore me out. I would always tell people, I'd rather deal with my criminal client. Okay. They weren't, they would call you times, but for the most part, they were, hey, he's taking care of it. And, we're not going to worry about it until he tells me to. And that was it. And, over the years, I tried cases all over the place. You name it, I tried cases on it. When you first come out, that's what you should do. Nowadays, and I saw this from toward the end of my career in private practice, and certainly during my almost 9 years on the bench, lawyers don't try cases. They don't try cases. I'm in the district court. Generally a trial there is 1 day. Okay. How else do you get experience, picking a jury, arguing before a jury, knowing what to do, what not to do? They don't get it. And it's really sad because all they look to do is just plead people out.
Why do you think that is?
I think some of them who were on the court appointed list, as it existed at that time, they weren't getting paid a lot to do it because they weren't up to the level 1 or A list. And it took me a couple of years to get there, but the circuit judges in Ingham County were like, hey, we got to move this guy up, because I tried cases. I filed motions, okay, to suppress evidence or about the identification, or, just to piss off the prosecutor and make him work. Okay. They just don't do any of that. And I used to just kind of get on people about it. I tell them, I said, one day somebody's going to walk in your office and they're going to have a wheelbarrow full of cash. And they're going to want you to represent them. And the first question they're going to ask you, well, how many cases have you tried? And when you tell them none, they're going to turn around and walk out. That's just money you're going to lose out on. And I don't understand it, but I would try and encourage folk to do that, because that's the only way you get better. Okay. I mean, I would try driving on suspended license case. I mean, it was just an opportunity to try cases. And some people say, well, the judges don't like it when you do that. I said, well, I don't care what they like. I'm not here to please them. No, they're not my client. I remember trying a prostitution case once, and it was interesting because the city attorney, when they rested their case, part of the elements where you had to prove that the person, in this case, the woman, was 18 years of age or older. He didn't do that. He wanted the judge to take judicial notice that she was over the age of 18, and he wouldn't do it. I mean, you look at her, you knew she was, but he's like, I don't guess ages, and they dismissed the case. I mean, why? Because I just said they just tried the case, and you look at holes, and they don't do it, and that's why court-appointed attorneys for years used to get such a bad rap, because they didn't do the work.
I got a big smile on my face when you said Perry Mason, because my father is an avid fan of Perry Mason. To this day, still watches it almost every day.
Hey, me TV at 9 o'clock in the morning and 11:30 at night. Okay,
that's right.
That's right.
Yeah.
When I first retired, I would tell people I don't do anything before 10 o'clock. That's because Perry came on at 9. Okay, and you just have to sit back. But like I said, that's part of the problem. And I always appreciated the fact that after I tried a case in circuit court, now I would always go back and talk to the jury. And they would be shocked to find out that I was court appointed. They said, well, you worked so hard. I said, they're entitled to a good defense. I would stack my record of trials up against any lawyer at that time and before. Any of them. You name them, I put my record against theirs. I won more murder cases. Okay. I probably tried somewhere between 17 and 22 homicide murder cases I had.
Wow.
I think I never had anybody convicted of first degree murder. I never had anybody convicted of felony murder, which would be a life sentence. I had 2 people that got convicted of second degree. Now, they were charged with felony murder or first. The rest of them, either we got manslaughter convictions, okay, which I count as a win because you just went from mandatory life to no more than 15. Okay, and you really had to screw up in prison for that, because usually the sentence might be 3 to 15, 7 to 10, or something like that. Well, that's a whole lot better than 20 to 40 or the rest of your life. And there were 3 cases I remember that, because of the work I put into it and with my investigator, the prosecutor had no choice but had to dismiss the case prior to trial, because they had the wrong person. So, working with Claude was not new to me. I've had people who were charged wrong, okay, that did not commit the offense. Okay.
Right.
I've seen that. I've gone through that. And, some prosecutors just want to go ahead and try it anyway. I'm like, okay, fine. You want to put another notch in my gun belt, I'm not going to stop you. But, when you get a jury that comes back after 45 minutes and says not guilty, that says something.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, you mentioned Claude McCollum. So I guess we should just dive into it. So could you give us some background on what happened with the LCC Professor murder, just to give us some background there before we
Miss
jump into Claude McCollum.
Carolyn Cronenberg was she was an instructor there at the college, and that main building that sits right there on Capitol Avenue. She came to work one Sunday morning, and uh, from what I understand, she was loading her stuff up on a cart and we're going through the door to take the elevator to go up to the second floor. She was in her classroom, when a person entered the classroom. There was a physical struggle, an assault and a sexual assault, and she was killed. That rocked the city because it happened right downtown, okay, in downtown Lansing. And the Lansing police came out, but this was like the jurisdiction, really, Lansing Community College police. And after a while, they decided they were going to investigate it, and they didn't need help from LPD. There was an interview with Claude, and I can't recall really how he came on their radar. And let me say this, I did not represent him at that time, at his arrest and trial where he was convicted. I did not represent him, okay? But apparently Claude was on their radar. They had checked, to get in the computer lab in the building, they had a Star card, which is like a card you would swipe to enter into the lab.
Remember those, yep.
And around the time she was killed, I think they went back and looked at people who may have been in the building, and there was Claude. But the one thing about the video they had at the time, and they had video of him coming in and out of the lab, but there was no timer on it, either counting down or counting up hours, minutes, and seconds, or, standard time, 8 o'clock, 2:30 a.m., whatever it was. They could only go by the swipe card in terms of his entry and exit. And they came upon Claude and they questioned him. And, he gave them a flip response. And the response at one point, one of the questions was, "Yeah, right, I killed her." And they took that as a confession, okay? That's like if someone tells you, "Man, kiss my rear end," okay? Do you really think you're going to kiss their rear end, okay? No, of course you're not. And Claude, you have to understand, I think they knew Claude had some mental health challenges, shall we say. And we found out later on, once I came into the case and some other lawyers I brought in, and we were working on the civil case, we discovered through the hospital records that Claude, at the time of birth, there was some oxygen deprivation. Okay. And that led to him having mental health issues. Okay. I hate to say he wasn't there fully, but, okay. And they took advantage of him. And he was arrested, and they claimed they had, and, a lot of things, and we're going to get into that when we talk about the trial, but that's kind of the buildup. And they went to trial. Claude was convicted. He was sentenced to prison. It was in front of Judge Giddings, was the trial judge. And it sat there until somehow on appeal, they discovered there may be a problem with the case, the attorney he had at that time. And they in the prosecutor's office are kind of looking at each other like, uh-oh. And it was interesting because Claude's brother made an appointment to see me. And it was more about representing the family, being the mouthpiece to handle the media, not to do the law, to handle the media. And I was like, well, okay, I can do that. And, we talked more, and I had a chance to meet with Claude, and they just decided, well, you know what? We want Hugh Clarke to represent him. So you have this case up here in the Court of Appeals, which is about to get kicked back to circuit court in Ingham County because they realized there was a problem. And it came back, There was, and obviously there were a lot of issues. We're going to get into that. And at that point, I filed an appearance and became involved in the case from that level. One of the first things we did is went in and filed a motion and asked Judge Giddings to issue an order to have Claude sent from Michigan Department of Corrections, send him back to the Ingham County Jail. Okay. He's no longer a convicted person, so he should be here. Why should I have to get in the car and drive all over the state of Michigan, wherever he was, to spend time to interview him? Some of those places you spend more time on the road than you would sitting there talking to your client, which Judge Giddings did. I mean, he realized that and did he. Judge Giddings was a great judge. He was very fair. He was fair.
What was it that came up that alerted the brother and others that there might be a problem with the case at that time?
Well, the brother and them, they got that from the appellate attorney. Okay. I mean, Claude he'd always maintained he didn't do it. Okay. That he wasn't involved in this. And, we were able to prove that.
There was a dramatic point in his conviction when he stood up and addressed the families and said that he wasn't guilty of this, right? And
yeah. But people look at it. Yeah, that's what they all say. When they say they're going to appeal, yeah, all guilty people appeal. People, they look at that because you have people who say that, and they're guilty as 3 left feet. Okay, but they have a right to appeal. But with Claude, I mean, they found out somehow, and I think it was somewhere about that he may not have been there at the time. And as we progress in this, you're going to see where that came from. Okay. After we got Claude down here and I was able to talk to him a couple of times at the county jail, I then went and, there was talk about, retrial and this and that. And I'm like, well, you didn't do it. And after a while, we were actually able to get Judge Giddings to grant my motion for bail and to release Claude on his own recognizance. Okay. Which, he did. And that was, and I'll never forget going out to get him that night from the jail once he was processed, because it was raining. I had this big umbrella and he and I huddled under it trying to get to the car, but there was a crush of media there and we had to stop and talk to them. And subsequently, the prosecutor's office, they ended up dismissing the case. The argument the assistant prosecutor made, Eric Matoizik, he claimed, see, what happened, there was a report from Michigan State Police, Sergeant
Young, right?
Jim Young.
Yep.
He had a report he did, and the report, he was their technical support person, and he analyzed the video. He put a timer on it. And he said to them, and he had in the report that at the time Ms. Cronenberg was being killed, Claude McCollum was in another part of the building. That was actually in his report. They claimed, well, this assistant prosecutor claimed, as all this is coming out, that he gave that report during one of the trial sessions to Claude's attorney. Well, Judge Giddings wasn't happy that, this stuff's happening on his watch in his court. And I understand he went back, he had a video courtroom. His courtroom was all video at the time. He went back looking through videos to see that. He didn't.
Wow.
I mean, he was not happy. Okay. I used to always say Jim Giddings was the hippie from the 60s that stayed that way. I mean, he could be tough when he had to, but he was very passionate and a compassionate man. One of the better judges we had. I don't care, people can say what they want. Okay. But he took a chance on people.
Well, that's amazing too, because there was in the Attorney General report when he ended up, investigating how the false arrest and conviction happened. They had made this an assertion in there that the report was given but the prosecutor didn't review it with anybody but the family and internally. And then as Sergeant Young was going up on on the stand, that they provided it to him minutes before that he was going to testify. And you're saying that even that, which already seems terrible, even that didn't happen, that it wasn't seen on videotape of him actually giving it.
No, here's what happened.
Wow.
The report that had that sentence or two at the end, there was a break they took. And they were up, the prosecutor, Matoizik and Marie Wolf. Now, all I'm going to say is this. When they came back and report they had, that part was not on the report. It was taken off. He had discussed, and we found out during the civil trial prep. One of my attorneys I had, I sent him, he went to visit Miss Cronenberg's son, where it was somewhere out of the Lansing area he was living. I can't remember where. Interviewed him. We got an affidavit signed and sworn to by him that during a break in the trial, he was in the witness room. That this prosecutor, assistant prosecutor Matoizik, came in, and her son said to him, well, you know, they talked about the report. And after the guy testified, they're in that room, and the son said to the assistant prosecutor, wow, his lawyer's a pretty good lawyer. How did he miss that? Because he didn't ask him about it. And he said the assistant prosecutor told him, because I took it out.
Wow.
We had an affidavit from him that said so, that he took it out. They had cleaned it up and took that part out. We found out during the civil trial, Jim Young was not comfortable with any of this. Now, you know, he turned out in the end to be one of our better witnesses, though he should have done it at the time.
So the Sergeant Young, who is working for the state police, is reviewing these videotapes and sees on the videotape that Mr. McCollum is in another area in the TLC building at LCC and could not have been in the other area during this portion of when this horrible crime was being committed. He writes this report and provides it to the prosecution, and the prosecution removes the portion where Mr. Young says that Mr. McCollum could not have committed this crime because he was in another area. And you get a sworn affidavit from the brother of the victim that says that this happened, that the prosecutor told him this. The son.
It's worse than that.
That's astonishing.
It's worse than that. During the trial prep, this assistant prosecutor went out and talked to Jim Young, and Jim Young told us that he gave him hell, saying, well, why did you put that in that report? You didn't have to put that in there. Nobody asked you for that. And told him, because he went to try the case and to prep it, and Sergeant Young told us, he said to him, what, that case is going to trial? Really? You can't win that case because that night. He said, I didn't ask you to put that in there, and I don't know why you did. And then told him, you can understand, don't mention it.
Wow. Yeah. And I saw in one of the articles that Mr. Young was riddled with guilt over what had happened.
He should have been.
Yeah.
He should have been. He knew at that time. Okay. He should have said something. He should have gone over this kid's head to Prosecutor Dunning's, or he should have went to his supervisor at MSP. He could have went to the captain, whoever was in charge of the Michigan post that he was at. Now, am I glad he came around and helped us out in the end? Yes. But you know what? It didn't have to happen.
Right.
But here's Claude, black guy, got some mental health issues. He's not all there. He's kind of a homeless guy roaming around. They didn't give a damn. They didn't care. That would have never happened. Never would that have happened to a white student from Okemos or some other rich-ass area. It would not have happened. So when we talk about justice system, Okay. Let's just get it clear. And you have an obligation as a prosecutor, you have an obligation, okay, to not bring that case forward and to do something about it. But Toyzik did nothing, nothing. And the
And
state
this is
bar
when,
grievance and the state bar grievance committee didn't even suspend his license when it came to their attention. They called me and I told them, I said, look, there's an affidavit with you. If you had a file, he said he had documents. I said, you look in the file, there's an affidavit from Ms. Cronenberg's son saying he told him he took that out of the report. You don't need anything from me.
so
And they
he,
didn't.
so the attorney general ends up investigating the case, and the prosecutor ends up firing that assistant prosecutor, I believe, right?
Yep.
But his law license was never in jeopardy. It was never taken.
You want to hear some ironic stuff? He ends up working for a law firm in Ottawa County who had received a grant from the state to have someone go to the prisons and teach and lecture inmates on how to how to appeal their conviction, and that's what Toyzik was doing. I'm sorry,
Wow.
I'm just like, you got to be kidding me.
That is ironic. I mean, it's rare that you actually get real definitions of ironic, and that is real irony. That's how did you handle that when you see this level of either incompetence or worse, malevolence? Or I guess, now that you are retired, you can speak freely. What do you attribute this to? When you see this, do you think this is racism playing out, or do you
What
think
else
that
could
this is?
You had an older white woman killed. Here's a black guy they arrest for doing it. They hit the first person off the street. He's investigated by Lieutenant Rodney Ball. By this time, he's lieutenant. Back then, he was a sergeant of the Lansing Community College Police, who testified in deposition. The only cases prior to this one he'd ever investigated were shoplifting out of the bookstore and maybe a stolen car. And he's doing a murder case. They did not want LPD's help or assistance. And they had a retired LPD officer working with their public safety department who had investigated one or two murder cases during his time with LPD. They didn't let him nowhere near the case. This was their case. We're going to solve it. We're the champions, and there we come. Screwed up from the beginning.
And LCC has that kind of jurisdiction with it. I
Yeah.
didn't even know that they had that within land. Wow.
He still works there. At least he did. They never fired him. He got demoted, but he cost them a couple $1 million, and he still worked there.
And so we now know from your work and others that the person that was reviewing the videotape knew that Mr. McCollum, who ended up being wrongly convicted for this, was in another area for, I think it was like 2 hours they had him on video, that could not have been at the spot or the scene where the murder had taken place. So we know that now. Then there was one of the jurors was interviewed. Her name was Tina. I reached out to her, but she didn't get back to me. But she was interviewed, and she said that she thought that Mr. McCollum was innocent up until the point that the evidence of the supposed confession came in. Now, when we were looking at that confession, you kind of alluded to it earlier, but my understanding is that, like, Mr. McCollum was asked, it kind of, you did this. If you did this, how would you have done it? And he started kind of pontificating on, well, maybe I was sleepwalking, or maybe I did these things.
Exactly.
Is that correct? How did that all come about?
Well, because they were questioning him, and like I said, you got to understand. If Claude was, say, for example, 20 at the time, he kind of had the mind of like a 10 or 12-year-old. Okay. And let's just back up for a minute. So once, we're on the case and we're looking at it, not only from getting it finally dismissed, but for the civil suit, we got a copy of the video from the TLC building. And you see Claude come out of the lab, and he sits in a chair outside of the lab, which is to the southern part of the building, the southern entrance. And then they have that north entrance further up. He gets up at one point and he walks out and he goes out the back door. Then a couple minutes later, he comes back. He sits down. He's got on a gray sweatsuit. Okay. And he sits back in that chair. And I'm telling you, man, I'm watching this video for hours, and it's like watching paint dry. Because he's just sitting there. He's asleep.
Yeah, he was homeless at the time, right? And
Right.
sometimes would sleep at the campus, and then was a sometime student there.
Yep. Now, I didn't notice it the first time. So you wait a couple days and you're, okay, let me sit back and watch this again. Click. As I'm watching it, I notice it's starting to get light outside. Because Claude's in the picture, and there's the door, and it was dark the whole time. I didn't catch it the first time. Well, all of a sudden now you can see sunrise. I contact the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. We send them a subpoena. They send us a certified copy of sunrise, sunset for that day. And the sun rose that day, say 8:03 or something. Clarke's sitting there. Now you put a stopwatch on it. Miss Cronenberg has already entered the building and is upstairs in her room being beaten, assaulted, and killed. Claude is sitting here in the chair. Now, why these folks couldn't figure it out is beyond me, but that speaks to the fact that they don't have that experience, okay?
Right.
I'm not a police officer, but I knew to do that because I represent a lot of people in a lot of these homicide cases and that kind of stuff, you go through and do.
Yeah.
And I mean, there was no way. That's why he had it in his report. He was in another part of the building and could not have committed the crime.
And so he starts getting questioned, and as we stated, he had mental challenges, and he starts just kind of telling a story, really, to satisfy these police officers. It sounds like, of
Pretty
saying,
much.
well, maybe I was sleepwalking, and then I believe he was asked for pretty specific details. In this case, there was some graphic things happen. It was a rape, it was a murder, and there was penetration with an object,
Right.
to the victim, and in a sexual manner. And in this discussion, Mr. McCollum said that there was white panties on the victim, and they ended up being purple. And then there was DNA under the victim's fingernails that hadn't been tested and hadn't matched Mr. McCollum. And there was a baggie there at the scene too, that the fingerprints were never examined and did not match Mr. McCollum in the resulting investigation. So there were so many things that just didn't add up. How do you think that this? I mean, I recall at the time that everything happened so fast. I believe he was arrested like 2 or 3 days after the
Right.
murder. It was just so quick. What do you think happened there? How did all of these people get this so wrong and put a wrong person in jail?
Because they were
prison.
so quick to solve the crime, to assure everybody, yeah, Lansing is safe, blah, 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 blah. Okay. Now, there are 3 ways to do an investigation. One is to exclude a suspect. 2, to include a suspect. Or 3, open. You go wherever the facts take you. Okay. And I shouldn't do this, but they took number 2. Okay.
That was
They,
perfect.
yeah, they I'm sorry, but
That was
took,
perfect.
they took number 2. they figured, well, we have this statement, we
Right.
have this confession. We don't need to do any of this.
I
Now,
gotcha. Yeah,
now,
they had honed in on the person that they thought that did it, so they didn't worry about the other evidence. They were just focusing on how do we get this person?
and what happened because of that? How many other people, women, were killed in Lansing because of that?
That's right. And that is really really concerning. So yeah, so you're alluding to Matthew Macon,
Yep.
the serial killer, as he's called, that committed 6, 7, maybe more murders, 6 that he confessed to, and he later confessed to this killing.
Yep.
And there was one quote that he had that just stood out to me when he was being investigated, and he said, "Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's 6 people, that I have murdered. I murdered them all." And in 2004, we now know that he murdered Barbara Jean Tuttle at 45. Her body was found in the location where another victim was actually found.
Right.
So this would have been before Carol Cronenberg's murder in January 23 of 2005. And Mr. McCollum, who was wrongly convicted for it, was arrested and convicted for that. And Mr. Matthew Macon was actually the real perpetrator of Carol Cronenberg's murder. And Mr. Macon ended up getting arrested again in June 2005, so about 6 months after the murder of Carol Cronenberg, excuse me, and was in prison when Mr. McCollum went to trial. And Mr. Macon actually knew Mr. McCollum and said that he was delighted that Claude McCollum was actually being tried for the murder and rape that he had actually committed.
What took it off of him, they were at some point around that time, they were in jail together. Okay?
Really?
They happened to be in jail together for an evening or, I don't know, maybe a period of time. But,
This was so when Mr. McCollum was arrested for the murder, he ended up spending time in jail with the actual murderer.
at some point, they were in lockup either at LPD or out at the county jail for a period of time. You got to understand, there were so many things with this investigation. The one beauty of doing the civil suit is discovery in Michigan, as the case law says, is broad and far reaching. We can get anything we want. And we were loading up, getting so much information. I remember sitting in Bonnie's one day for lunch, and I had a stack of papers I'm looking through, and I was waiting for one of the other attorneys from out of town was going to meet me there. And I'm going through some reports, some stuff I just picked up from Lansing Police Department, their quartermaster, because a lot of the evidence LCC police were storing there at LPD. And I ran across a report. This sergeant at the time, Ball from LCC, he went to Lansing quartermaster, took out some evidence. The evidence included a pink sweater that Ms. Cronenberg was wearing, some of Claude's clothing, and there was one other object I don't remember. But I remember his report saying what time he went to LPD to get it and what time he got out to the lab at Michigan State Police, which is off out there on Canal Road. 45 minutes. I'm thinking, it don't take 45. You say to the expressway. It don't take 45 minutes to get there. And I sat there and brought up Google Maps. And from LPD to the lab there on Canal Road, it's like a 22-minute drive. Here he's twice as long. The weather was bad. They had some snow out. but not to the extent it would have taken him that long. They had at his trial, they found fibers from her sweater on a jogging suit. The jogging suit was a blue Fila nylon jogging suit. When we started this podcast, what did I tell you Claude had on?
Gray.
Yeah. How did them things get on his clothes? I'm thinking, this is some Mark Furman crap.
Wow.
I mean, I don't know how else to explain it. They want to talk about how could it be transferred from, okay, with the amount that they had. He had on gray. If they had a gray flannel sweatsuit, like the cotton ones, and it was on there, I say, yeah, that's the issue. But it was on a different piece. And that gray jogging suit wasn't even in the bag with the stuff they took out to the lab for testing. Okay. That's why I'm telling you, there was so much stuff that went on. Now, they're busy taking that out there to identify these fibers, but like you said, they didn't check the DNA under her nails. Okay. They didn't take the fingerprints off that baggie. There were just so many things they didn't do. And they basically were just trying to cook this case together to say, this is it. Yes, Lansing is now safe. Come back downtown, go to LCC, walk around, do whatever it is you want to do. That's what they were that's what they were trying to do as well. I'm not going to say they weren't trying to find the person that killed her, but they were inexperienced and ill-equipped to do that. That just, all you ever investigated before was somebody stealing a book out the bookstore. Why do you think you can now investigate a murder? Come on.
Was there any evidence at the trial presented that actually demonstrated that fiber that was part of the part of what they used to convict him, that it was actually tied to him? I mean, if he was wearing
I believe they
gray,
did.
like they did.
I'm not going to say lawyers try cases different. Like I said, I didn't represent him at the time, but that would have been a big question.
Yeah.
Okay. And I think somebody who thinks, well, that was a confession, they got you saying that. Like I said, to me, it's like you and I say something, I say your mama.
Mm-hmm.
Which is what Claude basically was saying. Yeah, right. I
Right.
killed her.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And now, with Making a Murder and all these other, all the Dateline and everything, everybody's kind of aware of the flaws of interrogations and some of the ways that, especially people that are have potentially mental challenges, can be victimized in
Sure.
those and end up speaking out loud about things that aren't actually true, but just telling stories to satisfy whoever is interrogating them. Was the fact that he actually said that he may have been sleepwalking, was that presented at the original trial?
My understanding was they brought all that stuff up. Once they talk about his confession, okay, they brought all of that stuff up. Frankly, Claude was not, I don't think Claude was even competent to understand his rights and what they were talking about. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they're simple enough. And he's sitting there talking, but they got him saying all kind of stuff. And like I said, he doesn't know any better. I mean, I can't put it any simpler than that. He didn't know any better. He had no idea what he was saying. And to that extent, why would you even put that to mean he's the guilty person, where you have, to me, if you're investigating this homicide case, okay, so you think you have a confession. Let's see what else we have to build on that.
Mm-hmm.
Suppose somebody argues, well, he's got the mind of a 12-year-old. He's incompetent to understand it, blah, 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 blah. Well, out goes a confession. Now what do you have?
Good point.
What you got now?
Yeah.
Okay. So that's why you would do the DNA test. I mean, there's a rapid one they could do just to see if he's even in the ballpark. Okay. Send the bag in and get it tested. I mean, there are other evidence there. I mean, her room looked like there had been quite a struggle. Okay.
Mm.
And, and the injuries to her. And you have the report from Young that says he didn't do it because he was in another part of the building. said he
Right.
didn't do it. They said he could not have
Right.
because he was a different part of the building at the time she was killed.
Unbelievable.
Well, like I said, it was
Unbelievable.
right. It was right there to see.
Yeah.
Once the light goes on, like I said, and you see all of a sudden, yeah, you know what? Boom, sunrise. Okay, the sun's up. What time was that? If she was killed around 8:20, 8:30, I'm thinking, sun's up at 8:03, Claude's sitting there asleep. Start the stopwatch. Okay. Tick, 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 man. Didn't happen.
It's interesting too. You alluded to that the the brother had indicated, or brother or son that indicated that the prosecutor may have removed a portion of the report.
No, there was a son, there was
Son,
no mayhem. He told him, I
right?
took it out. Okay.
Because
Those,
in that attorney general report, they said something like the 2005 report had a typo. They said, and I thought that was really weird, and said it was corrected in 2006. I wonder if that typo was what was removed, and they alluded to it as a typo. Is that maybe what
Young,
happened?
Young had the original report. Okay. Like I said, there was, and see, I think they made a copy of it because, as I recall, Assistant Prosecutor Matoizik went upstairs to his office to confer with someone. His co-counsel at the table went in Judge Giddings' chambers area and made a copy of something. And then she went upstairs. Okay. Like I said, make no mistake. And we had an affidavit from her son that said, he said, his lawyer's pretty sharp. How did he miss that? And he told her, he said, because I took it out.
Unbelievable.
That may have, that thought about it. He said he told him, I took it out.
And this gentleman is still practicing law today.
As far as I know. I don't know how you
Wow.
sleep at night. I just don't. I don't understand how you could sleep at night knowing, okay, that you've done something like that to somebody.
Right.
That you actively participated and put the wrong person in jail.
So Mr. McCollum ends up spending almost 2 years in jail. He
3.
almost 3 years.
Well, when you look at the time he was locked up out of Ingham
Oh,
County
right.
and through, he was, I'm thinking maybe it was 39 months or something in that neighborhood.
Wow.
Okay.
And how was it now at this point? The report is now clear that this sergeant is saying he could not have committed this. At this point, the prosecutor has admitted that the serial killer that we'll get into has confessed to the killer, to the killing. What was the process like to actually successfully get Mr. McCollum out of prison? How was that? Was that a smooth process? Was, now that everybody sees clearly that he couldn't have done this, was it just like,
Oh,
let's open the doors and get this out as soon as this guy out as soon as possible? Or
we had him out before that.
wow,
No, we had him out before that. I mean, they were talking. I mean, and actually, when I looked over the prosecutor's file, it's interesting because there's an assistant down there arguing against bail. And I remember at some point later going through the prosecutor's file, had a subpoena, looked through their file of the case, and they had a motion in there for release on bail. So I don't even know why she was down there arguing against it. But like I said, Judge Giddings knew better. Okay. So he was out, before that. And then as I recall, and then once this thing with Macon came, I mean, it was just like, okay,
oh wow, he was out before
yeah,
the
if I'm
serial
not
killer
mistaken,
confessed.
yeah,
Wow,
if I'm not mistaken, I had him out before then.
wow, that's incredible. And so then it proceeds to a civil trial, I believe, and you represented.
We never went to trial. We ended up settling the case and went to mediation. We sued everybody. We're in federal court. We sued everybody, and, correct application of the law. Everybody's getting dismissed. Well, you can't sue Ninth Amendment. You can't sue the city of Lansing. So boom, we lost them. Yeah, you can't sue Stuart Dunn. Boom, we lost him. And everybody's getting dismissed. And we're sitting there like, oh my gosh. The only person that didn't get dismissed, Rodney Ball. And we kept saying to the judge, Judge Quist, and we just felt, man, this guy's just hammering, he's beating us, hammer and tong. When he wrote an opinion, okay, we had filed motions to move the trial to Lansing and against dismissing him. Judge Quist wrote an opinion, and it started in parentheses with the paragraph that from Sergeant Young's report that said, at the time the crime was committed, Claude was seen on camera in another part of the building and could not have committed this offense. I saw that. I said, yeah, we're about to get what we want. And he did. He hammered him. He said the case will be tried in Lansing. Now, you get a jury pool from the entire western part of the state of Michigan. Doesn't mean we will have a lot of people in Lansing. But it happened in Lansing. You got a lot of media in Lansing covering it. Kevin Grasha from the Lansing State Journal was all over it. And I let him interview Claude a couple of times with me. And then he wanted to do like a feature piece on Claude, and I couldn't be there. And I said, well, Kevin, I'm going to trust you to do it, but boom, boom, boom. I said, once we file a civil suit, there's stuff you can't ask him, he cannot talk about. And he honored that. Okay. I always had a lot of respect for Kevin Grasha. He's Cincinnati now. And, he spent the day with him and they wrote all this stuff, but it was just, we went to mediation. They had a judge, magistrate judge there for that as well. And we kind of got that settled in chambers. I mean, they knew you're not going to beat this case. Like I said, we're here in Lansing. You're going to get media coverage here. Chances are we'd have a couple, 3 people here. Let me tell you, people felt sorry for Clarke. There were a lot of people ticked off.
Yeah.
I can remember.
I was one of them. I remember this distinctly. This is why I wanted to talk to you, Judge.
Yeah.
Because I remember feeling, how could this happen in our backyard? You see these things on TV and on Perry Mason from my father and us watching it growing up, but you didn't think it would happen in your backyard. You wonder, how could this happen? So, yeah.
Well, like I said, it wasn't a surprise to me because I've seen it happen before. Right. I've been involved in those cases where wrong person. You got the wrong person. Okay. And one of them was it was a vehicular death. And they had arrested my client for that. And a couple people came to me and said, no, it wasn't him. It was so-and-so and this and that. And there were some people who were in the car with him. But they come, I interview them. And when I finished the interview, I called the police detective. I said, yeah, so-and-so, I'm about to bring them over there to talk to you. And drop them off. They had to end up, the prosecutor didn't like that. But why are you talking to them first? I was like, because they called me. Okay. What are you trying to say? I told them what to say? Come on, man. I don't have to do that. And they actually found out it wasn't him. There was another case I had involved a shooting at the Elks Lounge. It was out there on the South MLK. Jock Warren was his name, and I represented him. And said the wrong guy. And that case was interesting because the victim's stepsister was at the bar that night too, and she said she told it wasn't him because she said he was outside, and at one point when he was outside the bar, a group of people had surrounded him and were beating on him, on my client. Because she said she jumped in there with her can of mace spraying people, and she said, and that's when she heard the gunshot, and it wasn't him. Even the report, when you read the report, said the guy that shot him they described him as 6'2", slim built. Jock was 5'10", about 230, real stout, muscular guy. Okay. But then we went to the preliminary exam in Lansing District Court. Judge DeLuca, he didn't care. You heard the testimony. Bound it over anyway. Okay. I always like judges that, you know what? Yeah, you know what? Some stuff you let go to the jury, but here you have the victim's stepsister saying it was not him. Okay. We got into circuit court and had a pretrial. Prosecutor at that time, Mike Ferenczi, deceased, he died last year. Great guy. He and I had many, many trials together. Our stuff was legendary. We'd go at it hammer and tong, and then we'd go have a beer afterwards. But he read through and saw all the information, and he dismissed the case.
Wow.
So for this to have happened to Claude, no. Claude was a patsy. He was an easy patsy because he really didn't kind of know any better.
Mm-hmm.
I say, and they were just out. They just wanted to make sure they got this case and got this guy and the person that did it, and he just was the handy one.
Right. Now, the serial killer that ended up confessing to the instructor's murder, you alluded to this earlier, he ended up going on to killing 5 more that we know of. Can you are you familiar with that case? Can you talk to us about that case?
I'm familiar only from what I read, in the papers that, we had his confession. And it's interesting too, because I'm trying to recall, I don't have those files. Claude wanted everything once it was all said and done. So I gave it to him. But I remember there was a notebook. And I don't know, I can't remember now who it had come from. It had something in there about Macon. And I just can't recall. And, we were at some point kind of looking at him. And then when he got busted and admitted to these things, at this point now the question becomes, okay, so who's signing the check? Okay. And it was, it was just, you look at, and I'm not minimizing life in terms of people pre-Cronenberg, but if you look at the people who were killed after Ms. Cronenberg by Macon, because these people had the wrong person, those people could be alive today.
Yeah, that's right. So in 2004, he is suspected of killing Barbara Jean Tuttle. Then in January of 2005, about a year later or so, he killed Karen Cronenberg, the LCC instructor, but wasn't prosecuted for that. Claude McCollum went to jail for that. And then in June 2005, Macon is arrested and incarcerated. He did a home invasion and assault. He was sentenced to 12 months in jail. While in prison, McCollum goes to trial. They may have actually crossed paths in that time. May 2006, Matthew Macon has his 3rd probation violation. He was sent back to prison. And then in June 26th of 2007, he's released from prison again. And then only a month later exactly, he kills Ruth Holloman. Mm-hmm. Then August 7th, about a month later or so, he kills Deborah K. Cook. Then 2 days later, he kills Deborah Renfor. Then 4 days later, he kills Sandra Eichhorn. Then 1 day later, a 56-year-old woman is assaulted. August 15th, a day later after that, he kills Karen Yates. And then finally is arrested on August 28th. So there were so many points throughout this that he was in prison, and he's also a gentleman who had a long history with police. His childhood was terrible. He allegedly, his father was abusive. His older sister was taken and placed in foster care in 1983. He may have been sexually abused by his father as well. His James Macon Sr., the father, apparently used broomsticks and other objects when he was performing his crimes. And then we know that the Matthew Macon ends up later using these. He used a stick on a victim in one of them. He used an item on the instructor as well, and then he ends up, Mr. Macon, Matthew Macon, ends up going to prison, running away, escaping. And then when he was 14, he was arrested for sexually assaulting a girl with a stick. In 1994, he appeared in Ingham County Juvenile Court after escaping from Highfields. And he was sent to W.J. Maxey Boys Training School near Ann Arbor. He remained in the court's temporary custody through 1996. By age 16, in 1996, Ingham County Juvenile Court hearing, a court referee said, although Macon was making progress in the program's sex offenders, he required lifetime vigilance. But then, however, less than a year later, in October of 1997, he completed a sex offender treatment program. The court records show that a social worker believed the likelihood he would commit another sex offense was very slim. Quote.
Well, these healthcare professionals have, the different ways they look at it. I mean, you don't have a crystal ball, but you have to believe someone with that background, that history, and frankly, I mean, it's always been said that sex offenders have the highest rate of recidivism than any other group. So I don't know how you can just say the likelihood is low. What we see now, it isn't. He obviously has some type of dysfunction going on as well, because he's using an object on these women. Now, I don't know if he did it figuring, okay, you know what? I'm not going to leave any DNA or trace evidence if I use this object. I don't know what he's thinking, but there's something there that's kind of, not right. I mean, if you sexually assault someone, but you use an object, you don't use your own body part or anything. There's something there that should have been a telltale sign.
And it's so eerie that is what his father had done before. It's such a tragedy.
But the problem with it is, and people that have mental health issues, is what can you do about it? There were people who had mental health issues that would come in front of me. They're great people, but when they stop taking their medication, that's when they will go off the rails and find themselves on the other side of the law and standing in front of me. I'm limited on what I can do. I mean, how do we ensure that people stay on their medication? How do you do that?
Right.
What, you have to come down here to court every morning and we get to put the pill on your tongue? Well, we're not equipped to do that. And then that's the problem that we run into in this. And this is not anything that's just Lansing problem. This is a nationwide issue where you have people with mental health issues and they stop taking their meds, or they're off their meds, and they go commit an offense. Well, yeah, one can say that's an easy way to come up with an excuse for what they did, but the point of reality is that's exactly what it is. And how do you supervise someone on probation to make sure that they are taking their medication, other than, trying to test them every day, which you don't have the manpower to do. Everybody wants crime solved, but nobody wants to pay for it.
Right. Do you have any magic wand solutions that you think, if you were a dictator for a day, that could actually fix this tragedy?
Well, I don't know.
Or solve this issue of mental health in America?
I don't. I mean, stuff I would think about, you guys would really think I'm crazy, so I'm not going to go there.
I like that.
Okay. Well, look, in some countries, they're like, what offending part of the body did they use? And they chop it off. Then you got some countries, you steal what hand, all they want to know, what hand did they use?
Mhm.
They use the left hand, boom, all of a sudden, that left hand is gone. I don't know. I mean, maybe I mean, what do you do? I mean, it's not a matter of giving somebody a pill today that will suppress that urge to be violent or to act out or to commit a sexual offense. there's no magic pill for that. And it's something that someone has to take, again, on a regular basis. And again, how do you enforce that? How do you make sure they're doing that and they're taking their meds? I mean, if they're incarcerated, that's easy. But it's kind of like, well, they're going to there's no history of ever sexually assaulting someone of the same sex. Okay. So you think they may not necessarily assault one of their inmates. Okay. But the jail is not a place for people with mental health issues. That's, I would see that. I mean, I had one guy, he would get arrested for, let's say, disorderly conduct. Well, the police would go to release him the next morning and he would assault a police officer. So now he's got another case. At one point, and as long as his case was open and assigned to me, every other case he caught while this first one is open was coming to me. I had 9 cases with him. He had mental health issues. I mean, he constantly, what do you do? I mean, at some point, the police got to look, okay, you can't keep taking the guy to jail. It's not going to do anything. It's not going to help. I mean, we were finally able to, I got the city attorney and his attorney at one point in my office. We closed the door and I told him, look, this guy has 9 cases. He has some mental health issues. You two need to figure out what we're going to do about this and get the case resolved. Well, they did. They came up with a plea agreement. It was fine. But even where I was sitting, I don't have any facilities or any place to send him. So you know what? Time he got out of jail for that, I don't know. He probably within a couple of days, he committed another offense and then was down in front of some other judge. And the county jail is not built for that. That's why I think when, some people talk about defund the police, I agree with President Obama. That's a horrible way to present the issue. I think maybe instead of buying a tank or, more guns for the department, there's some ways the city and the department have to look at their budget and say, okay, how much can we carve out to have somebody working here or 2 people that are mental health professionals, okay? Or that we can call, because we know this old crazy Hugh's acting up again. He's out there running around the yard with, with half his clothes on and, and instead of taking me to jail, maybe somebody there can come out, can talk the person down and have some service that they may know of that's available to them. And you have to build that in. The state has to build that in their budget. Okay. We go back.
How did that happen too? Is it my understanding is that there used to be a pretty strong community mental health where we had a lot of hospitals that were set up for that, and that they began being defunded in the 80s, I believe.
John Engler.
And is that? And
John Engler.
What happened there? And I mean, now I just heard a presentation from the Sparrow president. He said that they have anywhere from 15 to 40 individuals in the emergency room on any given night waiting for space because they're in there for a mental health crisis, and there's nowhere to put them. What happened here? What happened to mental health in Michigan?
Well, the Lafayette Clinic, which used to be in the Detroit area, I know that specifically when John Engler was governor, they quit funding that and closed that down, which causes an issue. And that was, I think, maybe around the same time that they got rid of Recorder's Court. Recorder's Court in the city of Detroit was where all felony criminal offenses got tried that happened within the city of Detroit. They didn't go to Wayne County Circuit because Wayne County is a huge county. Okay. And they were doing it there, but they got the idea because there was a gentleman who was from Grosse Pointe, got snatched out of his car, was beaten to death by 3 rascals in Detroit. And they were found not guilty at trial. So they come up with this whole thing that, blacks don't convict blacks in Detroit, to which I say hogwash. I mean, most of the blacks in the Michigan Department of Corrections in front of Detroit, guess what? They went through Recorder's Court. But nope, they got rid of that. And now everybody was in Wayne County, which now had the effect of changing the jury pool. In Recorder's Court, your juries were going to be majority African American. by a wide margin. Well, now when you do it Wayne County wide, you have fewer. Okay, you don't have that same percentage of representation. And that's when they started defunding stuff, and they closed Lafayette Clinic, and the money they started putting things elsewhere. I can't tell you necessarily where it went. Okay. But they stopped, and without proper funding, listen, it takes forever to get, you send someone to the forensic center for a competency or responsibility examination, but God, it takes forever. It takes forever to get a report back. I mean, they're that backed up. And they always, I mean, it got worse while I was on the bench. I mean, at times to get, I'm sitting there holding felony cases open because somebody's sitting there down at the forensic center or in the jail waiting to go to the forensic center for an examination as to whether or not they're competent to stand trial. Okay. And it just, it's the funding. I mean, they don't have enough people there. And I think sometimes some lawyers, they use that as a delay tactic. Okay. I mean, I would refer, I would do motions for people to go to forensic center, but it wasn't a lot of them, because most of them you sit there and talk to them, and once you figure out they're oriented times 3, they know the offense they're charged with committing, they know the role of the judge, the prosecutor, the defense attorney, and they're able to sit there and tell you, no, I didn't do that because I was at such and such a place with so-and-so from this time to that time, and blah, blah, blah. Well, guess what? They're obviously able to assist in their defense. They don't sound incompetent to me. Okay. But you have a lot of folk that are going down there, and it's just getting backed up. And that's just to determine if the person can even go to trial. Okay. And there's the funding for it isn't there. It's not, I guess, a popular area that they want to look into. Okay. I mean, I don't know what to say. I don't know who's going to step forward now that now that you folks in Michigan have a Democratic Senate, you got a Democratic House of Representatives, you got a Democratic governor, seems to me, and you got all this money left over from money they got from COVID. Instead of sending $156 to everybody in the state of Michigan, let's take that money and put it into service like that.
That makes a lot of sense.
And fix your potholes. But I mean, there are 2 things you need to do. One is you need to do something about those roads. But secondly, you have to place money in care for humans, for people who cannot care for themselves, who do not have insurance, who do not have family.
Yeah.
Okay. You have to.
Did it get more difficult for when you were a judge? Did it get more difficult from the transition from the 1980s to the period that you were a judge? Did it get more difficult to get somebody committed for a mental health issue?
I don't think there was understand when you say committed, okay, you are, I think, talking about some type of long-term facility treatment.
I admit I'm a little ignorant on the topic,
Okay.
so I would defer to your expertise on this way more than mine.
Well, if you mean committed that they need to be there for a period of time to address their issues, I don't think getting them there is necessarily the problem. The problem is where you going to put them, and do you have the staff to treat them, the staff to work with them? Okay. And is this a person who can be released back into society, again, on proper medication, but how do you make sure they maintain their level that they're taking their medicine every day?
Yeah.
Okay. You and I say, just as a general rule, you know what? So we got high blood pressure and cholesterol. Guess what? You take your pills every day. Why? That's because I don't want to drop dead of a heart attack. Okay. Someone that has, some severe mental health issues, they may not be thinking that way.
Right.
They're not going to say, well, I better take my meds so I don't go out here and kill somebody today or assault someone or do something. Okay. So what I won't say it became more difficult. It
Gotcha.
became a question of, okay, where are you going
Where
to
to
put
put
them?
them?
What are you going to do
Yeah.
with them? So you have a lot of these specialty courts nowadays where they're trying to figure out how to do things. They have a mental health court. Okay, I'm not really sure how that works. I never participated in that as an attorney or as a judge. That was usually handled by someone else. In fact, Lansing didn't have one at the time that I was there. But usually, I think from what I'm hearing, a lot of times those are like group counseling sessions, and you do
Mm,
this or that, and then you come back and you sit in front of the judge and tell them all the wonderful things that have gone on, and you're in there for a period of time. But you know, those folk that are people that are manic depressives or bipolar that can, sit have a great conversation with you right now, and 3 seconds later, boom, they're off the rails. I mean,
right.
government has to address that. There's no other way. I mean, government has to
Right.
address it.
Right. So I wanted to flip around on something and go back to your time as a litigator, as a lawyer, and I understand that you represented Tupac Shakur.
I knew you were going to ask that.
You
Yes, I
got
did.
to ask that.
Yeah.
You got
Yep.
to.
Yep.
What happened there?
Well, he apparently had done a concert at Michigan State University, and he had a baseball bat, which was part of a prop in his act. And there was some Yahoo from Flint whose microphone Tupac was using. And as part of his thing, he dropped it down on the stage. And the guy comes out during his act and picks up and says something to him. And he claims Tupac assaulted him with the bat. And I'm just like, really, dude? But the funny thing is, I didn't know who he was. I had no idea. I had a young black female secretary at the time. Um, she was in her early 20s. And I remember coming in the office one day and she was all excited. And she said, Watani Tayem be called, and they want you to represent Tupac Shakur. I looked at her, I said, are you drunk? She said, no, Watani Tayem be called, they want you to represent Tupac Shakur. I'm like, who the hell is Tupac Shakur? And she said, he played brother in the movie Juice. I said, well, that didn't make my playlist. I didn't know who he was. I had no idea who he was. So, I took the number. This guy was his agent, and I called him back. He was out of Atlanta, and we talked and chatted. And I said, sure, okay, this is what I need. And I said, I'm going out to East Lansing lockup where he is. So I go out there, and I go up to where the cell is, and he's sitting there. And he didn't have his shirt on, his big thug life written on his tattoos here. I'm like, what the hell? I know that myself in. But, uh, so, we got him out, and he had to come back here a couple, 3 times for stuff. Every time he came, I'd go pick him up at the airport and get he and his road manager at the time a room at the Radisson. I figured I know how to keep him out of trouble. I park him here at the Radisson and say, now, police department is right down the street. Okay. But we would have some great conversations. I mean, things that he would talk about in life that he wanted to do. And, he said he always wanted to play a lawyer in a movie, and he was trying to they were working on something with Mickey Rourke. And we just sit in the office sometimes and we would just, we just chit chat and talk about those things. We got him taken care of, it took a little assault and battery hit. And right at that time, he had to be in New York for a trial on that sexual assault case. So he actually never came back here to do the little 9 days he had, which they ended up just saying, okay, fine, we're done with it because he got sent into some prison time out there. But
Gotcha.
his persona when you sat with him one on one, it is not what you would think at the time.
Mm.
Okay. It's certainly not like some of these folk you see nowadays.
Yeah. So you also spent some time on the school board here in Lansing.
I did.
And what would you say what is the state of public education in America today?
Uh, uh, there are a lot of challenges. There are just a lot of challenges. Some of it has to do with student behavior, parental involvement, and teachers. I mean, they're just, you got to put them all in the group together that there's this issue, this problem that you have. In Lansing, I was appointed to the board, I want to say it was in 2003. And that was been in September, I believe. And we had election in November, and some other folk got elected, Linda Cornish, Melanie Rogers. And the three of us, along a couple of, we started to form the nucleus of how we're going to get things done and whip this district into shape. Now, of course, at times we get resistance from some of the old timers who've been there because they were just used to doing things the same way. And I remember saying to, one of the things that got me is that they would always talk about doing this and that, and they had these meetings, subject kind of, they're still talking and talking and talking. And I said to one of my colleagues one day, I said, is this what education is? You want to talk about everything and don't do shit? I said, maybe sometimes you have to try and just see if it works.
Well said.
And once, we have some leadership things going on, and there were those of us, 6 of us, a 9-member board, there were 6 of us. We generally had the 6 votes, 5 to 6 votes all the time to do things, and the other 3 would get upset. But it's like, no, we have to turn some things around, and this is the approach we're going to take. We addressed discipline and school fighting in a way that actually I got into back and forth with the director of student services. So I said, well, look, the problem you have here, 2 kids get in a fight at this school, 2 kids get in a fight at this other school. What the principals do is just totally different. This may be your 3rd fight and you got a 3-day suspension. Okay, some other school could be your 1st fight and you got a 5-day suspension. I said, no, we can't continue this. And I said, I looked at it this way. 1st fight, 10-day suspension. 2nd fight, 20-day suspension. 3rd fight, 30-day suspension. Now that's 6 weeks. And they were like, well, we can't suspend kids for 6 weeks. I said, why? Their mom and daddy worry about them. Let them figure it out. And we went back and forth on it a lot. And I finally caved in. We caved in. And I said, okay, we'll let the principals have discretion on the first one up to the first 10, up to 10 days, their discretion. I said, but I don't want to see kids suspended who are defending themselves. Okay. I said, if somebody jumps a kid in school and the kid fights back, that child should not be suspended. That's a punishment for them.
Right.
I said, and the second thing that we're going to do, we have a section in the code of conduct is disorderly. I said, if you instigate or you're standing there watching or attending a fight, you get suspended for 3 days. And I said, because the kids fighting in school, what? For other kids to see. If ain't nobody looking, they ain't fighting.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And we implemented a lot of those things. And the feedback we were getting from public safety at the time was they would hear these kids saying, man, I can't get into another fight. I'll be out of school 20 days, man. That's a whole month. The message became clear.
Right.
We put a lot of emphasis on student improvement and student achievement. And I'm proud to say during the tenure I was on the board, along with Melanie Rogers, Linda Cornish, Ken Jones, Jackie War, Guillermo Lopez, we saw student scores on those standardized tests turn around. I remember I would do a pizza party for any school, any class, where the kids, where they had 100% proficient in whatever the tested area was. First time I did that, we had 1, and I'm not saying this caused it, but my last year on the board, I did 3 or 4 of those pizza parties.
That's
And
great.
we had partners in the community. Hungry Howie's, Chris Scolo, who owned Hungry Howie's there, he would donate the pizza. Airmark was our food supplier. I got them to donate juice. Okay. And I think the first year we even gave the teachers a certificate for $10 off a pizza or something. But we put the focus back on the kids. So we had that. When I left the board December of 2010, our worst performing elementary building was 88% proficient.
Wow.
That was our worst. Okay.
That's amazing.
Our high schools were in trouble. And when we hired Dr. Waller, we told him, you got to turn these high schools around. And, we caught a lot of help from people because we were about to give him a raise one year, and a lot of people didn't like Dr. Wallace. He wasn't a real people person. I mean, Dr. Banks was great. She'd go out in the building, she'd hug these little kids. I don't want to see him out there hugging these kids, especially little girls and these girl students. That's not okay. But he had a different way of getting things done, and he did. After his first year, Sexton and Everett made safe harbor. The following,
what does that mean?
Well, you're either failing or you're about to make it, which is a safe harbor that you're close to the little points you had to make.
Gotcha.
And then they continued. The next year, they came off the list of failing schools. Eastern was just a constant issue. We just could never get it done there. And I don't know if it was a culture. I mean, at one point, we were looking at actually selling the building to Sparrow. But we had some people who stuck their nose in where it shouldn't have been on the board that was that. And actually, we were looking at getting maybe 4 to 5 for that building. I understand the later school board got 2. I'm like, okay, I don't know how you go down in value, but whatever. And the test changed, and that became their excuse under the next superintendent. They would say, well, they changed the test got harder. And I would say to people, I'm off the board now, but I would say to people, well, you know what? The test got harder for students in East Lansing, Okemos, Waverly, Holt, Grand Rapids. The test got harder for everybody. I said, why is it when I look at test results, Okemos and East Lansing, they went down a little bit, but I look at the ones for Lansing and it's like you just tossed a bowling ball off the top of Michigan National Tower.
What happened there? Why did that?
Well, they'll just tell you the test got harder. They didn't do stuff. I mean,
What do you think happened though?
When you have 96 and 94% of your 8th grade students who are not proficient in math, you know what's going to happen when they go to 9th grade. They're not going to pass algebra. They're not going to pass it.
And it's going to be so hard to catch up.
Mm-hmm. I'm not sure what to make of it. I mean, everybody has an excuse or an explanation. I'll just say in some things. My son went to Lansing schools. He did well. Okay. But he found out, he did high school in East Lansing, and he found out, well, he wasn't as smart as maybe he thought he was. Okay. His science, biology in Lansing, he told me, they just watch movies every day. I'm like, wow. Okay. So, he never really had a good grounded background for higher science applications then. I mean, he did well in math, okay, in high school. I mean, and, they had things that they did there that I tried to get the district to do.
What drew you to being on the school board?
I wanted to do some things to help the community, do something else, just practice.
Do you feel like you were able to help the community?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, there's another thing, they give the wrong people credit for Promise Zone. There would be no Promise Zone in Lansing if it were not for Dr. Wallace and myself.
Wow. That's amazing.
There would be, I'll never forget, I was in Florida at a conference, and Dr. Wallace called me And it was about 7:30, 7:45 that morning, and I had like 8:30 tea time. And I'm like, okay, Doc, why are you calling me? What's wrong? Must be something wrong because you know I'm about to go play. And he said that his spokesperson, the school spokesman and government affairs person, Steve Sakayan, had come to him and told him about this legislation that had passed about districts and cities setting up a promise zone for kids for scholarship. And And I said, okay. And we talked about it. And I said, well, you know, Doc, get some more information. I'll be back next week. Listen, I'll talk about this. He did, and we did. And we looked at specifically the way it had to be set up, how it was supposed to be done. And then there was a mechanism to recapture city taxes, okay, to help fund it. Doc and I worked on a lot of it. We didn't tell the board because it would then become too political with one or two of the members. And I knew they were going to want to be on it, and their involvement would not have been productive. And we started, and we had meetings with Dr. Knight at LCC and his CFO. Our CFO would come, and we're looking at this and putting this together. And how do we put the board together? Okay, because you had staggered terms of 3, 2, and 1 year. And we looked at doing things, and from different walks of life, really. And we got together and figured out, okay, these are the group that bring something here that we like to, let's put these people on the board. We selected, and time we brought it back to the board for a vote, we had all the work done. We just weren't going to let a couple of them, who I won't name, okay, we were just not going to let them hijack this. And we had the votes to do it. Nobody gets more upset than when you walk in and you sit over there all you want. Well, let me help you. We got 6 votes. We got 7 votes. So when it's finished, what you got to say, and then we just going to move on. But we looked in business, and we had Kelly Dean. We had Joel Ferguson.
Two amazing people for this area. Yeah.
And, we had, and there was somebody else in business I can't recall. We had somebody from one of our colleagues, Melanie Rogers, was the parent quote person to be on the board. Joe Graves, who's a community person, was there. We had my wife, and some people thought, well, why is she there? I said, because she has experience writing grants. She was with MSU Science Foundation at the time, and she was used to writing grants for millions of dollars. Where you're starting this project, you got to have a grant writer. Okay. Then the legislature got to appoint people. The majority leader in the Senate and the Speaker of the House appointed someone. So we had Barbara Roberts Mason on that initial board as well. Linda Lee Tarver, I think she's still on the board. She was appointed by the Republican Speaker of the House. Maria Velasquez, we had her on there. No, that's not her last name. Oh God, she hears this, she's going to kill me. But I think she may still be on there. She's a Hispanic woman. We wanted that kind of representation as well. We were really inclusive of folk we had on there. And that's how it got started. Now, you got everybody else standing up taking credit for it. Let me tell you something. They didn't have a damn thing to do about it. They had nothing to do with it until we brought them in. Okay. Yeah. And what we found is they were doing them initially 2,500 a student. Sad thing really is what we found were students going to LCC. That money was being used for them to take remedial reading, writing, and math courses.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Didn't have skill.
Right. So when your time as a judge, I guess, what do you see as that pathway to crime? Like, you have these children that are not performing well in school, and then I'm assuming that in some cases you ended up seeing them later before you in your court. Is there anything? How do we stop this
Well,
pathway to crime? Or
well,
do you
you
see
know,
anything there?
there are a lot of different ways. Look, I saw that when I was a practicing attorney. Remember, I did basically criminal defense work. It's people, it's too easy for kids from lower socioeconomic levels at times, and from the environment they're in. Basically, someone driving a nice car, dressed nice, wads of money, jewelry, they're selling drugs. And it's just too easy for them to get involved in that lifestyle. And I would generally tell them, I said, let me tell you something. You don't get no retirement. You don't get no Social Security or Medicare from selling drugs. A career in drug dealing ends one or two ways: prison or death. Ain't no ifs, ands, or buts. I said, you may not make as much money if you work at a store or if you're a school teacher, uh, or you do this. I said, but you're able to walk down the street without, having to look behind your back all the time. I said, because somebody's always want to take your place. Okay. So you have that factor that people see and they get into, and it's unfortunate. Okay. It's glamorized by Hollywood, that lifestyle and behavior. Okay. And you have another problem too, I think, is might be one of the bigger ones, is when you have children having children. 15, 16-year-old gets pregnant, has a baby. What happens? They drop out of school. Sometimes they drop out to take care of the child. Well, they don't go back. So, education was never a priority for them. So how do you instill that now, with your child? And that's an issue.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think the climate in the buildings. When Dr. Banks was superintendent, when I got on the board, the first bond they had put up, I'll call it the swimming pool bond, only because it was some millions and millions of dollars, and it included a new swimming pool. Well, that went down. Okay. People were like, spend money for a swimming pool. Ugh. So when they were looking at a second bond and taking some things out, they hired this company, and they did focus group with families and teachers and parents in the district. And what they found, among the things they found, a lot of it was directed toward what would you like to see. So they were able to trim down what they were looking for in the bond the second time around. And that's when I got on the board. But one of the things from the study was a lot of the parents said they did not feel welcome in the school building. They didn't feel.
Why was that?
They felt I guess the attitude and the way the teachers and/or staff there treated them or responded to them. Okay.
So that's going to create a bad culture where the parents don't feel like they can be involved or attend the school, and then so they're not going to be as involved in the child's education.
Well, it becomes an issue. And, I'm not saying if that's accurate or not. But
it was the feeling. Yeah.
Yeah. And my experience when I had a child, when our son was there, was different. Well, I'm not going to walk in and you're not going to talk to me any old way.
Right.
Okay. You're going to answer my questions if I have them. But I remember when he was in elementary school, every year before the next grade started, I would go in and I would ask his teacher, what do you need? Well, we need a little, 2040s rounded scissors, or we need to. I would go to Staples or Office Depot and I would buy a bunch of those supplies and bring them. And then every time the kids, once he was at least third grade and say fifth grade, where they took little standardized tests, I always went back and had boxes of new pencils for the kids to take for these standardized tests. Because, the pencils they got, first of all, you got a great lead on the pencil, but there's no eraser because they don't erased everything down. Okay. Mm-hmm. So I always do that. I would take a case of copy paper to the office. Okay. I wasn't there trying to tell them what to do. My work I saw more was to partner with them. And what is it I need to do or should we be doing at home to make sure that our child is successful?
Well, I appreciate that because I have a 4-year-old that'll be attending kindergarten next year. So I actually just took a note of that. That'll be the first thing that I do is ask the teacher, what do they need?
Yeah.
That's great
Because,
advice.
yeah, there's always something they need. Maybe it's, 20
Yeah,
boxes of crayons. Well, I'm glad I'm in a position to do that. Here's some crayon.
right.
Okay.
That makes
Um,
perfect sense.
just get ready to
S-
sell a lot of dough and cookie dough to raise money. Yeah, we did that too.
So your experience being a judge, how did all of your experiences defending so many people and that were wrongly accused and either getting them off before they went to jail or in many cases getting them out of jail after being wrongly convicted too? How did that inform your time as a judge?
Well, I think more so from the fact that I had a large practice and I represented thousands of people and I was a solo practitioner for the most part. First thing is I knew how to run a docket. Okay. I'm like, no, you need to get in. Okay. What is the issue with this case? When you have pretrials, you sit down with the lawyers and try, okay, what is it? I'm not trying to avoid having the case. I don't care about y'all having the trial. That's what I'm here for. Okay. If you want to try the case, let's try the case. But let's make sure the case is ready. Now, what's your evidence look like? What does yours look like? Well, maybe you guys need to find a resolution. I'll go over here and talk. You finish, come back, and we'll see what we can do. And the ability to get people to do that and quit all the damn huffing and puffing up your chest coming in here. I mean, that's not gonna do anything. Anybody can lose a case. Anybody can win a case. Sometimes you humble up and win a case. Okay. What I didn't like again is the lack of pretrial work. When I got on the bench, it was interesting. Uh, say you had a drunk driving case, or some case that the city attorney was doing, and we had a pretrial, and they would say, "Well, we don't have a police report yet," and they were taking the position they didn't have to give it to them. Like, yeah, you do, and they would file lawyers. I found out they would file a FOIA request, and I'm like, "What the hell are you filing a FOIA request for?" I said, "Here's the first thing that's going to happen with a FOIA request. You're going to get a letter back requesting a 15-day extension. That's standard." I said, "That's why we're sitting here today at a pretrial to discuss the case and you have no report." I said, "I'll tell you what," and I let lawyers know, "You don't need to do that. You got a problem, they won't give it to you, come see me. Bring a subpoena. I'll sign a subpoena. They're going to give it to you." Okay. We can cut all this nonsense out. Let's get this case moving. Let's see where it's positioned and what we're going to do.
Yeah.
And that's the approach I took. I did the same thing with the felony cases. I mean, I think people loved having pretrials because we may have 5 or 6 planned an hour exam conferences. I bring everybody in the office together. Hell, we'd have 5, 6 lawyers sitting in there, the prosecutor, and we just going through files and cases. Okay, well, what is this? Well, what's your offer? Well, I said, "That's no offer." I said, "You ain't making them no offer. They're not going to accept it because there's no offer." Okay. You charge assault GBH, you're offering them felonious assault, which is a 4-year. This ain't nothing but a felonious assault case anyway. So, if that's your best offer, fine. We'll see you all at the exam. See you Friday. Next. And we would just do that. Lord, they would just sit there. That's just something they weren't used to because that's not how my colleagues operate. Okay. I'm not going to tell you how to do your case, but I'm just going to point out, well, you got this issue here and that issue there. That could be a problem. Maybe you two need to go out and see if you can do something else or talk before the exam and see if you can come up with something else because this isn't going to work or these are the problems you're going to run into.
What is your take on there seems to be kind of a maybe a change in the way prosecutions are handled in cities. At least it seems from the outside. You hear that there tends to be a favor towards no cash bond, no cash bail,
Well,
and it may be a well. We recently had the prosecutor here in Lansing that ended up resigning, and there was at least it appears that there was some controversy over the cases that she would choose not to take. What is your
she
what is your
retired.
take on this?
She retired.
Okay.
Well, they come up with, I mean, not everybody can afford bail. And there's no guideline to say if you commit this offense, it should be within this range. But if you don't have any of that. Most of the time, it's a number we pull out of our pocket. And, the more serious it is, the bigger the number. Okay. A lot of people we let out on PR bonds. Okay. Because this is what it is. Okay. Marijuana, cocaine, small ones, they have PR bond. You're going to test with me. Don't do any drugs while you're on bond. Okay. Don't piss me off and make me revoke your bond. Okay.
And that's a personal recognizance, right? Where
Yep.
that's where you don't put up any money. You're just on your on
Yeah.
your honor kind of thing. Okay.
There's a dollar amount attached to it, $1,000 PR bond. So if you show back up, you're good. If you don't, you owe record $1,000. But guess what? Just don't even enforce that. And I would look at stuff and say, well, no wonder people do what they do. You ain't going to do anything about it. You're not doing anything about it. That's why you have a problem. Okay. My colleagues used to have issues with me. Well, hell, I didn't care. You know why? I got results. I remember the jail staff, they used to love to be working when I was on arraignments. Okay. We just have fun. I remember a guy once got picked up. He owed the court fines and costs of about $800. He owed it from some other judge before I was even there. So he's standing there and we're kind of going back and forth, getting information. And I said, look, I said, man, that's a nice coat you got on. I said, man, is that a Pelly Pelly? He said, yeah. I said, man, that sure is nice. I said, man, how much that coat cost you? He said, this is about $1,000. I said, oh, okay. Take it off. He looked at me. I said, you heard me. Take it off. You got $1,000 to buy a coat. You must have my money, the court's money. Officer, take that coat. He came back the next day, paid the $800 and told the clerk, yo, Judge Clarke, he crazy. That man crazy. I said, but you know what? I got that $800. And I had colleagues upset with me. Well, if the paper finds out, I don't care if the state journal finds out. I said, you know what? I told Carol Wood about it. Councilmember Wood loved to go to meetings and tell people that story. Ain't nobody mad about that. That's why you guys got $2-3 million in the street and you do nothing to collect it. I said, you don't want to send nobody to jail. You don't enforce collection. What message does that send?
Why has that happened? What is there like a difference in philosophy on this? Like what is the background on? It seems to be more common now. Is that correct?
Sometimes people have been around too long. They don't know when they need to go. Okay. And my view is simple. I don't want you to ever question. I mean what I say. Okay. If I tell you, you need to do this, you need to do it. And I would always tell people in sentencing, as they got to speak, I tell them, I'm an old baseball guy. 3 strikes. I said, you keep coming back here on violations. I said, at some point, it's just going to be done. And I'm just going to send you to jail and we're through. And if that happened and they came back, it's their 3rd, 4th violation, I would just say to them, what did I tell you was going to happen? What did I tell you? That you were going to send me to jail. I said, yep, and that's where you're going. It's like kids. When you grow up as a child and you're going to see with your daughter, they know how far to go before they really push that button and you're going to come down on them. They know what they can get away with.
Right.
Okay. And when you let them do it,
how to behave.
And when you do that as a judge, he ain't going to do anything. Why would you comply? You know I ain't gonna do nothing.
That's so true. Yeah.
So, you just look at it that way. But some people, they don't want to change. They're used to doing it a certain way. That's it. You don't know how much of my colleagues fought me to bring technology to the court. They were still doing search warrants by fax machine. Somebody fax you at 2 a.m. Well, you got to get up out of bed, go downstairs to where your fax machine is, turn on the light, sit there, read it, that, stir around, and send it back. And then remember to take it to court the next day because you got the original. I tried to talk to them about doing it electronically. And I researched it, did all the rules that comply with the court rules and this and that. They didn't want to do it. Well, we have fax machines. I said, yeah, that's so 1985, pardon me. And then I just told him, I said, well, let me tell you something. That's it. And I talked to some of the other judges, district judges around as well, because we were doing it at that time. We would all work during weekends. We rotated. I told my bench, I said, well, let me help you all. I said, my son's in high school. Basketball team, track team. I said, they play games out of the area on Tuesday and Friday. And when it's track season, they could be in Detroit. I said, so, to be honest, if it's my weekend or my week and he's got a game in Saline, Michigan, and I'm on call, I said, I don't know nobody down there. So I get a call from Metro and they need a drug search warrant. I'm going to tell them I can't help them. They're going to have to call one of you. I said, 'cause I'm not going to sit at home waiting for a call that may never come. I'm going to be out here supporting my son. Yeah. All of a sudden, they were like, well, you can try. Yeah. And, it was set up. Everybody had iPads. And actually, I really wanted to get it done in police cars as well. Okay. And they have the infrastructure to do it because you get stopped at 10 o'clock for drunk driving. A lot of times the blood isn't being drawn till midnight. Okay. Time they take them back, do this and that, draw up right up the search warrant for blood, send it to you. You send it back to them, and then they get the Sparrow. You can do that from the car. You got a computer in the car. Put the template in, type it up, email it to me. I read it, email it to you, and guess what? You got a printer in the car. So once you send it to me, just drive the Sparrow. Till you get the Sparrow, you can just tear it off and walk in. Here it is. But what we did with the iPads, they still have to call and tell you that it's coming. But I just reach over in the bed, grab my iPad when it comes. I can read it, and if it's good, hit drop and drag my signature and the date, email it back to them with a copy to the clerk's office. I go back to sleep. I don't have to worry about taking no search warrant in the next day. It's all done electronically.
Wow. So you were really 24/7 as a judge.
Oh, try to get that done. I got them to start to look at stuff. Now, not everybody would do it. And we would do that on arrest warrants and complaint. Instead of, they call you on Saturday morning and say, okay, Judge, we're ready. Well, you go downtown to your office. You might spend the first 45 minutes swearing out complaints and warrants before you see anybody. And then they got to take it, and then they got to go set up the file. Then you start doing arraignments. I'm like, why do I have to do all this? So I had it set up where there was an affidavit form that they could swear to, include the facts. I said, I don't need a book. Okay. It was domestic violence. Joe and Mary had been married for 6 years. Joe came home from drinking. Mary asked him where he'd been. He slapped her 3 times and she has a bruised face. I don't need a whole lot more facts to say probable cause that this offense took place. What they would do, they call me. It's okay. We send them over, and they would email it over. I sit down, have my cup of tea. In the morning, I'm looking at it. I'm signing them, emailing them all back to them. When I email it back to them, they know now I'm on my way. I get in the car. I go down there. Within 10 minutes, we're ready to rock and roll. Okay. We're ready to do arraignments. Well, they fought me on that. I told them, I said, you folks going to learn. I said, You either get on the bus or you're going to get hit by the bus. Well,
Yeah.
guess what happened when COVID came along? They behinds got hit by the bus.
Ah, right.
Okay. So now all the stuff I talked about doing and doing recordings from home, I said, why do I even have to come down here to do an arraignment? We got technology to do it.
Yeah.
Now they do them, they keep them on YouTube. One meeting, a judge from East Lansing told him, said, well, this is the stuff Judge Clarke talked about 4 years ago.
Ahead of your time.
Exactly. But, I tell people, you're not going to work harder than me. Okay. This isn't about not working hard. It's about working smart.
That's right.
And there's a
So
difference.
Well, are you familiar with the debate around the, police issues and the question of qualified immunity?
I am, but let's go back for a minute to bond.
Yeah. But yeah.
So I'm out here in New York now. Wife is vice president of Stony Brook University. And we were at an event and I was talking to some judges. Their cashless bond here is crazy. I don't understand it. They don't even let the judges consider the potential danger to society the person represents. Yeah.
So the person can just get out without any.
They let so many people out without any bond here. It's crazy. And I mean, I sent this judge, she was the chief judge of a civil court, but I sent her a copy of Michigan court rules that these are things we can look at. So why can't you determine they cannot consider whether or not the person represents a danger to society? It's crazy here.
What would be the rationale behind that? Why would somebody think that's a good idea?
Legislature.
So it's a political issue.
Yep. And the Republicans beat them up on that during the election. It didn't necessarily do a whole lot, but it does present an issue. I mean, come on. The guy knocked somebody upside the head with a baseball bat 3 times, and he's out without posting it. He's out on the PR bond without posting what? I mean, I understand.
Do you think that increases crime?
Well, I think, again, it may send a message of, well, ain't nobody going to do anything. I don't believe you lock people up, and I don't believe you're guilty just because you're arrested. But there should be something to make you stop and think. Because there's some people that, I'm sorry, should not be released pending. You go in a store, fire a couple of shots and rob somebody. No, I think maybe you need to sit down until we get your case resolved. I'm worried about you. Or these people who shoot at the police. Well, how shoot at the police? What chance do you and I have? Okay. I mean, I think you have to look at it. I don't think bonds I set were crazy. I mean, I did set a $15 million bond on a guy.
Wow.
But he wouldn't tell me his name. Wouldn't answer any of my questions. Had an attitude. Well, okay, you buy $15 million. See ya. He was like, he looked at him. Have a good day. I mean, I know it's going to probably get reduced at some point. Okay. But I'm just saying, it's like, well, I don't know who you are. So you know what? I'm not letting you go anywhere until I do.
Right.
Okay. And some things you look at, I mean, something, you said $200-300 cash bond. Why? Because, if they come in and plead guilty, how much you going to fine them? $200-300. You're done. Okay. I don't have to worry about putting you on probation, chasing you down to make your payment. Well, hell, they don't even want to do that anymore.
Really?
I said, so you don't send somebody to jail. You assess fines and costs, and now they don't pay it, and you can't jail them or, give them hell about it. I said, well, why you do anything? What message does this send? It sends a message that nothing's going to happen. And that's why most people, I mean, you talk about experience I had with people committing crimes as a judge. No, it's when I was a lawyer. It's when I was a lawyer. Okay, because then I can really talk to them. That's why when I was on the bench, I wasn't trying to send nobody to jail. You know why? It hurts them more when you take the money out their pocket. Okay, they don't want to part with the money. Going to jail 10 days, that don't bother them. Hell, they probably know 2, 3 people out there. But
Wow.
but you take their money and you owe me money and you come in court like this. I had one guy come in, he had on these designer Timberland boots and he had on this nice leather coat, his hat and stuff. I was like, Timberlands you got on designer ones, aren't they? I said, yeah, those are $300. I said, oh, you got a Burberry jacket on? What was that? What that run? 400? I said, I know the cap you got on was 75. I said, because I got one just like it. I said, so you come in here, got $1,000 worth of clothes on, and you're going to tell me, excuse me, that you can't pay this $50 a month that you asked to pay? I always ask, well, what can you pay a month? Okay. Well, I had one guy, he's sitting there, I find him $100, something, whatever, he's sitting there fiddling around in his pocket, and he pulled out a 20, talking about that's all he had. I said, your hand was in your pocket too long, empty it, to roll like that. Yeah. Well, I'm watching him. I know what he's doing. Come on, I'm watching you, dude. Come on. I mean, I had one guy, he owed, I forget how much money. It was about $800-900. And he was from outside of Lansing area. And he came. He thought he was going to leave. No, 10 days in jail. Go have a seat. The police cuffing, they taking him down the hall. He raising all kind of hell, dragging his feet. They dragging him down the hall. They get to the window. He says, okay, take me to the window. Let me pay you. They came back and told me, they said he pulled out a wad like that, paid the $600. Okay. I'm telling you, that was the thing. They don't want to part with the money. Okay. But like I said, here, I think bail should be reasonable. I mean, generally, if you're charged with murder, I mean, nobody's going to let you out. But some of these other offenses, you have to have something to guarantee that people will return. They argue that in the federal system, 98% of the people on a PR bond, okay, on their own release, come back. I said, yeah, it's the federal government. I said, if they catch you in St. Louis, they're going to send somebody to bring you back. Heck, here, if you're in Detroit and get caught, they're going to let you go because nobody, the Lansing police are not going to drive down there to get you. I said, feds are different. Man, they send a marshal after you, put you on their plane, bring you back. I said, you can't compare them to. You can't.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So, I'm sorry, your question was?
Well, I was just wondering if you had a take, you hear with the issues surrounding concerns about the police, and you hear about the idea of qualified immunity, and that, some people argue that if you ended qualified immunity for the police, that it would potentially resolve some of these issues. And I have no, I'm pretty ignorant on the topic, so I just wondered, since I have you, do you have a say in that?
Well, I think with that, it's harder to sue. And as a practical matter, the officer isn't going to pay anyway. The municipality is going to pay. Okay. Well, Rodney Ball with the Claude McCollum, he didn't reach in his pocket and pull out $2 million. Okay. That came from LCC. So I think the immunity issue has to be looked at. I think it should, you set a reasonable person standard. Looking at the conduct that led to this, is it reasonable to assume that there could be liability by the police officer? I mean, it's something like that.
Is my understanding right? It's right now. It's a very high bar, isn't it? Where it's like the police officer has to know for certain that specific instance would be illegal. Is that how it works?
Well, I think that's pretty close to it. But some things you look at, I mean, we all saw, and I think because of COVID, a lot of people became educated on police conduct when we saw the George Floyd matter. Okay. I mean, that was so obvious. You don't need qualified immunity. I mean, you're going to beat that just by watching what they did. And officers get upset. Well, you know what? You have to change the way you deal with people. You have to change the way you do things. And I'm sorry. You see that type of egregious conduct happen more where you have a white officer and a black defendant. But black cops ain't going to be left out. They're going to join too. We just saw that in, the Scorpion unit that was in Memphis, in Tennessee, with the guy that was killed in the video. And now we see another video from, I think it's Virginia, in this hospital where I'm like, why do you have 10 deputies and 6, excuse me, hospital personnel in here trying to subdue this person? And I'm standing around looking. I'm like, oh my gosh. I said, well, that's a problem right there, that it takes that many. But you can't, I mean, look at some of the shooting. So there was one in South Carolina years ago. They tried to stop the guy because he had a warrant out for child support. He's driving all crazy, and he finally bails on his car, and he's running in some field. The cop gets out, and he shoots him in the back. Really? Really? For a child support warrant, you do this? You don't have to. First of all, the guy was driving a Mercedes. You have the car. Okay, you got the car.
Right.
You're going to find it. It ain't hard to find. Or you know what? If I was a judge, you got the car, good. Put it up for sale. We're going to take time. We're going to seize the car. Yep, that's it. Now, or a guy's running from the police when he has a knife, but he's running away from you. Why are you shooting at him? Why are you doing that?
Mm-hmm.
Because you don't want to run? And I think folks look at it. I mean, it's interesting. You see more people getting upset because Donald Trump might get indicted, okay, than they do when they see this stuff on TV. Well, he shouldn't have ran. Okay, so that means you have a right to kill somebody. Okay, but you see nothing wrong with anything that Trump's alleged to have done. I'm not saying he did anything. Okay, but I'm just saying you have this information and you're more upset about this, yet you get Kevin McCarthy and them talk about equal justice. Really? For who? Because I never hear you say anything when people are getting shot in the back or getting a knee in the chest and they're suffocated. Okay. Or this guy, Hamadou Diallo in New York, where the police in the precinct beat the crap out of him and took a broomstick and shoved it up his rectum. I don't remember them coming out complaining about that. Okay. So, and I think a lot of it's cultural. I mean, it's the way things have been done. Okay. It's some of it. And I give a lot of credit to those officers. I say a lot to the police in Lansing. You know, I don't recall us really ever having one like that. There may have been maybe one or two. I don't know. There's some talk about the girl who was in the bank at 3 a.m. and the police shot her. And there's a lot of back and forth about what she did and he did and or didn't do. Okay. But we don't see a lot of that there. And I'm grateful for that. Okay. Yeah. I mean, I used to get these.
You wanted to be a police officer originally, correct?
God, man, where did you dig that up at? I don't tell too many people that. Scared of you. Well, I was a criminal justice major at Wayne State University. You know, I wanted to join the Detroit Police Department, and I did. Went to the academy, and the next day they said, "Well, we're not taking the class because we don't have any money." Oh, okay, bye. And the rest is history.
You just, as I said originally, I've just been so impressed with your career and your accomplishments and everything you did for Lansing, and I thank you.
Thank you. You're welcome.
What are you most proud of as your professional accomplishments? I know outside of your family and obviously the things that you're very proud of in your family life, but what are you most accomplished for? Maybe for what you did for or proud of what you did for Lansing or in your professional career?
I'm going to say, you know, you got different categories of things, you know, you did, you know, working in politics and then, you know, doing stuff with the school district. I think what I'm most proud of has been my ability to help people that needed help. Okay. And sometimes at risk to my own personal safety. Okay. There was an incident one year where I got a call from some people. Their brother had shot a Lansing police officer, and they were looking for him. And he wanted to turn himself in, but obviously they were afraid, what might happen. And I discussed it with my wife, and she wasn't real happy at the time, but she understood. And I went down to the LPD, and I told them specifically the officers I wanted. I said, I want Lieutenant Parks and Officer Gill. There were two cops I knew, and I knew we would be all set. And I said, and I'll need a vest. Okay. And we went to the house where he was, and I talked to him by phone. I said, now come out, don't have anything in your hands. Now we're riding there, and Parks had a shotgun across his lap, and Gil had his firearm, because when we got out the car and the doors were open, I remember Gil saying, Hugh, move your head. And I turned around, and he had the gun trained on the house, and my big head was in the way. So I was like, oh, what? Let me come over here. And he came out, of course, he had his phone in his hand. I'm like, drop the phone. Okay, which he did. So they saw he had nothing in his hand. They took him into custody. And that was good. I was very pleased about that we were able to do that. I've been places before. I remember I went to Quality Dairy one day. There's the one there on Saginaw and Cedar. And I saw a lady behind the counter, her name on her name tag. And I looked at it, and it was familiar to me. And I put my stuff I was buying on the counter, and she said, are you Attorney Clarke? I said, yes, I am. And she introduced herself, and she said, I'm so-and-so's mother, and mentioned her son's name. And I said, okay, I thought that's who you might be. And I said, well, how's he doing? And I had represented him on a case. And we got him a YTA status so that once he completed, his record was clear. And she said, you helped him out of a bad situation. He went to law school, he passed the bar, and he's practicing law in Detroit. And it just made me feel so. Wow. So when or I go someplace and somebody will tell me, you helped a friend of mine out, they're doing well. I was in a Home Depot one day, and standing in line, this guy behind me, and he said, are you Judge Clarke? And I'm thinking, oh, shit. Excuse my language, I'm sorry. The way he said it. And he said, you sentenced me and you put me in jail. And I said, I did. He said, yeah. He said, and I want to thank you. He said, because I haven't had a drink in 6 months. He said, I realized that was just not doing me well in life. Okay. And I want to thank you. So I think it's those stories that I like.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. That's amazing.
I'm not a perfect man, but nobody is. And I'd rather be defined by what I did to help people than a lot of other stuff. And people there would know, and there are people there that know. But I'm just saying, those stories make me feel better.
Yeah. I think that's the perfect place to end it, unless you want to talk about anything else, because I just loved how you wrapped that up.
Yeah. No, I'm good. Like I said, I did things for Lansing, but it's more I did things for people in Lansing. And I tried to show people in my work on the school board and other social groups I was with, here's a different way to do something, okay, that you might get a better result from. And if we don't try, we're not going to know.
That's right.
But I said, it's about, as my father, rest his soul, used to always tell me, he said, you have to look out for the common man.
That's right. Well, Judge Hugh Clarke, thank you so much. I really appreciate this time together.
Thank you for having me. I enjoyed it.